Hey guys, Miss Elise here. Just want to say again how much I miss you, and I really mean it. I do miss you very much. Very disappointed we're not going back. I can't say I don't enjoy being out of school a little bit, but I really was hoping to see y'all before summer, so a little disappointed. But let's get into some leaf structure because I know y'all are very excited about that. I don't know if y'all remember me saying this during class, but I hate plants. I don't know why. It's my least favorite thing to teach. They feed us, they give us oxygen. You'd think I would like plants more, but I just don't. I never took botany, which is the study of plants in college. I just think they're pretty boring. And I think probably Mrs. Desmond would probably um, highly disagree with me, but to each their own. So I still am going to teach this with a lot of energy and hopefully give you a lot of different ways to remember stuff. But here we go. All right, so I just wanted to kind of go over some plant classification for you. I've already talked about it. You have plants that aren't vascular, non-vascular plants. It's going to be like your mosses are going to stay low to the ground. They have no tubes to transport. And then you have vascular plants, and your vascular plants evolved later. They have tubes, therefore they can transport water up and food down. So they can grow off the ground. They don't have to stay close to water. They don't have to stay low to the ground within vascular plants. So inside vascular plants, then you can have non-flowering plants, which would be like your gymnosperms. And then you can have flowering plants, would be like your angiosperms. So non-flowering plants are going to be like your ferns that have spores, or your gymnosperms, which are cone producers, or coniferous plants like pine cones, pine trees. And then your flowering. Now remember, flowering is really where we're focusing. We kind of are skipping over the structure of the rest of them. But you can have a monocot or a dicot. All right, so I'm going to say those words, so I just kind of wanted y'all to know it. It's not on your notes. But a monocot, if you recall mono, like monomer, monosaccharide, hopefully you remember that mono means one. Okay, so it's going to have one cotyledon. Mono means one, cot means cotyledon. And when we get to seeds and flowers, we'll talk about what a cotyledon is, but monocots have one. They came first of the flowering plants. So they're going to be a little bit, the way I remember it is they're easier, their structures are easier because they came first. So the leaves are going to be parallel veins. Parallel means, remember, they all go in the same direction. They don't cross like a railroad track, so their veins are parallel. They have fibrous roots, and then their flowers are going to be in groups of three. So 3 petals, 6 petals, 9 petals. A dicot, we've learned before because we talked about a disaccharide. Dicot means 2. So it's going to have 2 cotyledons in its seed. And they're a little bit more complex. So they're going to have these branched veins where all the veins are kind of going different directions. They're going to have tap roots, and their flowers are going to be higher multiples. So 4s and 5s. So this is where we're going to have 12, or maybe you have 8. So 8 petals. So that would be your dicots. Okay, so let's jump into this leaf. We're going to review first. So leaves can come in different shapes, different sizes, depends on how much sunlight they need, because this is going to be where we absorb our sunlight, is in the leaves. So if we are having a hard time getting sunlight, like in the tropical rainforest, the leaves are going to be really, really big because they're fighting for sunlight through the canopy. If we're not worried about sunlight, but we're worried about losing water, because we can also lose water through the leaves are going to be smaller, like in the desert where some of them are even the needles on a cactus. That's a leaf. So it's just, size is going to depend on where they are. All right, so you have different sizes of these leaves here. And then let's go over the function. So right here on your sheet, we did functions last week, but I just wanted you to remember the function of a leaf. What is its job? What is the purpose of a leaf? Remember, shape gives you function. So the shape of a leaf does matter. So the first thing that we're going to do in our leaf is we're going to do photosynthesis. Okay, and photosynthesis, we're going to go over in just a second. And then also in the leaf, that's where we're going to do our breathing. So I know it's hard to believe that a leaf actually breathes, but they do have these little bit tiny mouths on the bottom of their leaves. They're microscopic, so you can't see them without a microscope. That is where we're going to do gas exchange. So remember, gas exchange means bringing gas in and then taking waste gas out. So for humans, gas exchange is taking oxygen in, and then remember, we're breathing out CO2. That is our waste, carbon dioxide. Plants are opposite. Remember that they are opposite. So they don't breathe in oxygen, they breathe out oxygen. Okay, so they are opposite. So gas exchange for a plant means we're going to take carbon dioxide into the plant and oxygen out of the plant. Okay, so just remember that they are opposite of us. All right, so photosynthesis. It's been a while since we've learned this, but we have learned it. In my class, we went over keep your P's together. So photosynthesis starts with a P, and it's going to happen in plants and protists and producers. Okay, so all of those are P's. And then it's going to happen in the chloroplast, which looks like a pickle. So you hopefully remember all of those P's that we learned, weeks ago, months ago. So photosynthesis is the process where the plant is going to take light and change it into sugar. And that form of sugar, we try to drill into your head over and over again. So what kind of sugar is it that comes out of the plant? I hope you just said it. Okay, all right. So here is a picture of the plant. Now, I hope that you try to fill it out yourself without cheating and practice, but what goes into the plant? So if you were going to take care of my plant, if I was going to pay you money to take care of my plant, what would you make sure you gave it? Well, the first thing is you wouldn't want to hide it in a dark closet because it would die. So you got to have light energy. So that's going to be the first one. All right, the second one, and this is the one where remember people are talking to their plants, and when they're talking to their plants, they're growing better, and some people thought it was because the plants had feelings. No, the reason they were growing better was because when I talk to you, what am I breathing on you? So carbon dioxide. So those leaves are going to take in carbon dioxide, and they're also going to take in the last thing, which is if you were going to take care of my plant, what would you make sure you gave it? So you just have to double click those boxes to get them open. But you would make sure you gave it water. You'd want to water the plant. So those are the three things you're going to give the plant. And so the water obviously is going to be taken up by the roots, and then those vascular tubes are going to transport it up to the leaf. The leaf is going to take in its own carbon dioxide and its own light energy. Then it's going to put all those together, do photosynthesis, and it's going to spit out two things. The first thing is what we call a byproduct. We don't really want it. It's not really what we're doing photosynthesis for, and that's going to be oxygen. That is our byproduct. It's kind of like the plant's waste. And the other thing is like the star of the show. What is the purpose of photosynthesis? Why do plants do it? Because they're making what? Sugar. What kind of sugar? I hope you remember, but it is glucose. Glucose is the sugar that plants make. So you have that picture. It's a different leaf there, but same things going in, same two things coming out. All right, so now what I want you to try is I want you to try to write the formula. Remember, we did this on the red card sort in class over and over and over again. Y'all are pretty tired of it, but don't forget to add those little plus signs. So when you do a formula, it should be light energy is what we put in, plus what else do we put in that is going to be a reactant of photosynthesis? So it's going to be carbon dioxide. I'm just going to abbreviate CO2 and water, H2O. And then if you remember, you're going to have an arrow maybe. That means yield, okay, or produce. And what are we going to get out of the plant? What are we going to produce out of the plant? Well, that's going to be oxygen. And, oh, it doesn't like my box. It's too low down. Just move these up for just a second. And glucose. So glucose's formula, remember it is a sugar, so it's going to be CHO. And then you have a sandwich. So your 6's are on the outside and your 12 is in the middle. All the good stuff's in the middle. All right, so that is glucose's formula, C6H12O6. This has all been a review of photosynthesis. I really hope that it helped you to remember photosynthesis happening in the chloroplasts. They look like pickles. And so now we can move on to the harder stuff because that stuff you should have already known. All right, so let's go down to the cross section of a leaf. So what is a cross section? A cross section is if I went up to this leaf, cut out a little bitty square on the leaf right here, cut out a little square, and put it under a microscope, this is what it would look like. Now you're like, dang, that's thick. Well, that's because it's under a microscope, so it's going to show all the different cells. And so it's made up of many different cells, and on the bottom, each one of these little things is a cell, and then you've got the green little blocks or circles or columns. Those are each cells. And remember, when you put cells together, you get tissue. So this layer is a tissue. This layer is a tissue. This bottom layer is a tissue. And then remember, when you put tissue plus tissue plus tissue plus tissue together, then you get an organ. So a leaf is actually an organ of a plant, like your heart or your stomach. It is an organ because it's made up of tissues. All right, so first we're going to talk about the leaf layers or the tissues. And the first one is the cuticle. All right, the cuticle is, kind of what's on your fingernail, a cuticle. But a cuticle is going to be this waxy part of the leaf. So if you've ever touched a leaf, usually, especially around here, the leaves are very smooth on top and then kind of fuzzy on the bottom. And again, it depends on what leaf we're talking about. But usually, sometimes they're smooth on top and bottom. Sometimes they're not smooth at all. But that would be a cuticle. A cuticle is going to be waxy. It's going to feel like a candle. And that wax is to keep water from escaping because wax is a lipid. So cuticle is going to be this very top layer right here. This is my cuticle. Remember to double click those boxes if you're trying to type in there. It's the best way I could figure out how to do it. And this leaf only has a cuticle on top. There is not a cuticle on bottom. And remember, again, the cuticle is there as a waxy coating. Now, why would a plant need a waxy coating? Well, like a cactus is completely covered in wax. The whole thing is smooth. It's covered in a cuticle. Well, that's because the waxy coating is to prevent evaporation. So we don't want water escaping, especially in a cactus. A cactus does not want to lose any water at all. So it is covered in this waxy coating to prevent losing water. Some plants don't need a cuticle. Now, here's a tricky one. Why would a lily pad be covered in a cuticle? It's sitting in water. It's not scared to lose water. It's literally sitting in water. But why is it covered in a cuticle? Well, because the cuticle can work the opposite way too. We don't want a bunch of water coming in either. So the cuticle can work both ways. But in a cactus, we don't want that water leaving. So no evaporation, no transpiration of water from a plant. All right, so the next layer that I actually didn't put on your notes, but is the epidermis. So that's going to be this brown layer here. This would be what we call the upper epidermis. Now, epidermis might sound familiar to you because you also have epidermis. It is your skin, okay? So this is their epidermis, and it does the same thing as your skin. It just protects the leaf. So you have an upper epidermis, and then you have a lower epidermis, which is this bottom kind of brown layer. So they both protect the leaf. You don't have to know that. I didn't even put it on your notes, so that's great. All right, so let's go to the next leaf layers. Well, after the cuticle and epidermis, you have this layer right here, and then you have this layer right here. So these green layers, the one that has columns, and then the one that has all these circles. So again, in pre-AP, I'd have you memorize these. This top one that's in a column does most of your photosynthesis, pretty much all of it. All your chloroplasts are going to be piled up in there, and that's because the sunlight that we absorb is going to bounce down these little columns. We can do tons of photosynthesis in these columns, and that's why they're shaped like that. Remember, shape equals function, so it is able to do lots of photosynthesis. Then these down here, this is where a lot of your CO2 and oxygen are going to go through these, this kind of like a sponge. It has all these holes for your gases to move through. They can do photosynthesis. They also can store the glucose, but they do have some chloroplasts in them. They're just not as tightly as packed. All right, so both of those, this is palisade mesophyll. This is spongy mesophyll. So that layer, we're just going to call it the mesophyll, and you don't have to memorize spongy and palisade. Aren't you lucky? So this is your meso. Meso means middle. So mesophyll is going to fill the middle of the leaf. So meso, middle. So this is all your mesophyll here. And its main job, the mesophyll, is this is where we do all of our photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is going to happen here in the mesophyll. So that's going to be your mesophyll. All right, so the next layers that we need to talk about are the stomata and the guard cells. Now, I only put stomata on here. They kind of go together. So first thing, stomata is down here, and it's called stoma if it's plural, okay? So kind of like foot, feet, kind of changes. But this would be a stomata, and it's more the opening. Okay, so this cell and this cell are called guard cells. So you have a guard cell and a guard cell, and that makes up your stomata, okay? So guard cell, the opening is the stomata, okay? And so we're going to click this and maybe and label your stomata. Oops. All right. Can't spell today. The stomata is where we're going to breathe. Okay, so when it's open like this is when we can do gas exchange, where CO2 can come into my spongy mesophyll, into my leaf, and oxygen can leave my leaf. So as long as those guard cells are in this shape, okay, they have to be kind of curved, then your stomata is open. Now here's the problem. If your plant starts to lose water, the vacuole, the big central vacuole, gets empty. And when that happens, it doesn't push on the cell wall. We don't have any turgor pressure. And without turgor pressure, your cells don't stand like this. They go into a stage where, like hypertonic, it just kind of goes like this and it flattens out. Now, it kind of doesn't make sense because most cells you would think would already be shaped like a rectangle, but not your guard cells. We want them shaped like this because when they're shaped like this, it's open. When they lose too much water, they close. And then your leaf can't breathe. Okay, so what's more important, having water or breathing? Well, for the plant, it's having water. Okay, so he's okay with closing as long as we're not losing water. It's kind of like if you left a water bottle outside. If you leave a water bottle outside and the lid is on the water bottle, will any water evaporate? What about if you leave a water bottle outside with no lid on it? Which one's going to evaporate faster? Well, the open one, the water should leave first. So the same idea here. If we close our stomata and there's no openings, then less water can escape. If we water our plants, or maybe it rains, and we suck up a whole bunch of water from our roots, then those guard cells will get turgor pressure and they'll open up. And then your plant can breathe, okay, and gas exchange. So the stomata is important because this is where gas exchange is going to happen. And remember, gas exchange means we are taking CO2 in and oxygen out. That is what gas exchange is. We're exchanging those gases through the stomata so that the leaf can do photosynthesis. All right, so those are your guard cells and your stomata. Okay, so we have, I must have missed something here. Uh-oh. That's not good. Oh, here it is. Okay, so the vein of the leaf is, again, if they're monocots, the vein is going to be parallel. And if they're dicots, they're going to be more netted and go in different directions, more complex. So this right here is your vein, this gray looking bunch of cells right here. Now, most of these cells are really long and skinny. They don't look much like a cell, but they are. Each one of these tubes is a cell. And they're made up of two different kinds. All right, and we're going to talk about these again and again and again. So you're going to hear me talk about these. So this is the xylem, like xylophone, xylem, and phloem. Oops. Phloem. Okay, so xylem and phloem. I practice saying those. All right, I have a silly way to remember this. So what is going to happen through those tubes? Well, those tubes, the xylem and phloem, they go, they're not just in the leaf. You're going to hear me talk about the xylem and phloem in the stem and in the roots, because guess what? This is what transports. It is like your veins and your arteries transport your blood, which carries your oxygen and your glucose. The xylem and phloem are also going to transport the important stuff from the roots up to the leaf, like water. And then when your leaf makes glucose through photosynthesis, it's going to transport that glucose back down to the roots, because the roots are underground. They can't do photosynthesis, so they're starving down there. So the leaf is going to feed them and send them food. So that's what those tubes are. All right, so I have a silly way to remember this. So your xylem, and it really on this part, I mean, you don't have to, I'm not that picky, but the xylem is going to be some of the tubes, and the phloem is the other set of tubes. And they're going in two different directions. All right, so here's how you can remember it. Alphabet. I know, I gotta say it. STUVWXY. So that's the key. WXY. Okay, can you remember that alphabet? WXY. So this is going to help you remember. The W is, oh, well, what did I just do there? Sorry about that. I clicked something. The W is for water. And the XY is for the xylem. Okay, so this is how you remember. What does the xylem transport? The xylem transports water, WXY. So what are we going to transport in the xylem? Water. So think about it. What direction do you think the xylem flows? Do you think it goes up the plant or down the plant if it's doing water? Okay, well, roots taking water, and then we have to transport it up to the leaves. So your xylem is going to flow up against gravity. All right, so phloem, and I don't know how else to put that. Phloem is gonna go with food, okay? And so that's how you can remember. Phloem goes with food. All right. So what food again are we transporting? Well, we're transporting glucose. So your xylem transports, I probably should have put transports there. I'm sorry. Transports water. And your phloem is going to actually transport glucose. In what direction do you think it flows? Down, because we're going to send it down to the roots, possibly to the stem if the stem can't do photosynthesis. Some stems don't do photosynthesis, so we have to send food down in that direction. So again, here's another cross section of a plant you can check out if you want. The vascular bundle, those would be your tubes. This one labels upper epidermis and lower epidermis, your stoma, your guard cells, spongy and palisade. So this one actually labels everything. This is all you really need to know right now. If you take AP Bio, we're going to get more into detail. So I hope this made it easier for you, and I hope you understand the structure and function of the leaves. Again, email your teachers if you have any questions, and we miss you. And I hope you have a wonderful week.